Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Today, I'm going to talk about communication. Specifically, I want to talk about clarity over volume. And this has literal applications, like talking on the radio. If someone doesn't understand you, it's not that you need to speak louder, it's you need to speak more clearly. But I think it also applies more indirectly, or not literally, to how we are speaking to each other. And it's easy to want to be the biggest voice in the room and be the center of attention. We're kind of trained to do that because that's how we manage scenes. We're trained to come in and take the reins, take control of the situation, and steer the situation in a way that's positively beneficial for us, for the patient, so on and so forth. But when someone doesn't understand you, when someone is not picking up what you're putting down, yelling at them, infuriating them, involving their ego, all of that doesn't help anything. It doesn't actually resolve anything, and it doesn't actually it doesn't solve the problem. So when we're engaging with each other, when there's conflict, a misunderstanding, a miscommunication, it's important to make sure that if you're the one who's sending the message, it's important for you to make sure, hey, am I actually communicating what I meant? And did I communicate in a way that is easily understood and doesn't have room for misinterpretation? Because a lot of people can hear what we think is very simple instructions because we're in our head at the time, but they take it a very different way than we meant. So this is like, for me personally, if I'm on a high stress call, that's when everybody's hyper fixated on something. And a lot of times, if you communicate something to somebody, they may not hear it the first time, or they may not fully understand it the first time. And so there's a couple of things I'll do. One, I always speak literally like we're talking right now. I do my best to. Obviously, if you're outside, if there's, a lot of noise, you have to broadcast over all of that. Okay, again, nuance. Point being, at a baseline, if I'm in a house, we have a critical patient, we're doing a lot of shit, I need to communicate with people, I'm talking pretty much like I do now, because a lower, more clearly enunciated tone allows people to process things right the first time. It also brings the energy level down a good bit. So speaking that way is incredibly important. There's a lot of times where I will, if I, say if I have an EMT partner who's I'm divvying up tasks to, or, multiple EMTs, other firefighters, whatnot, I may throw out things out of order, or there may be gaps between the instructions, and I don't want any confusion on this is what you should do now versus later or whatnot. So I usually do my best to say, hey, when you're done with that, can you please do this? Or, hey, I know I asked you to do that, but can you actually switch gears and do this first and then get back to that? Because patients change, situations change, scenes are crazy, they're messy, they're adaptive. So it's important to make sure that you're being clear and articulate in your communication and not just projecting louder. Because how many times have we seen it where, a medic will, give a directive, an EMT, misunderstands, even if they confirm, maybe it's not, maybe the medic just doesn't register it or doesn't like fully pay attention. And then they just bark and yell and get loud at somebody for not doing what they asked them to do. One, people aren't mind readers, so don't expect them to be. Two, it's always best to assume that the miscommunication is the fault of yourself as the communicator at a baseline. Start there and then address any other issues. So if somebody doesn't understand what you said, say it a different way, use a different tone. If they're getting upset and you can tell that they're, even if it's not an issue with your communication, maybe they're stressed, maybe they are worked up, take that into consideration, change your energy with them a little bit, bring them down some and explain, hey, we're good, it's fine. Can you please do this now? And then we can go on to this. Cool, problem solved. It takes you 2 extra seconds. It's not fucking hard. And guess what? People respond better to that, especially new EMTs, especially young certified folks who are still very nervous around things that you or I may think is run of the mill, easy stuff. They can be incredibly nervous about. Yelling at them does not boost their confidence. It doesn't teach them anything. It doesn't make them better providers. You're showing your dick and trying to act like you're all that in a bag of chips when you're not. So Always, always, always aim for clarity over volume. You need to project enough that people, well, to project enough and be assertive enough that people are actually going to do what you say, because on a call, you have to have clear communication, defined roles, and definitive action. But make sure that you are communicating those expectations effectively. Don't just fly off the handle at people if they don't understand. We should be encouraging confirmation, closed loop communication, all of these things, and yet fostering an environment where people feel comfortable saying, hey, I'm having a problem with this, or hey, I hear you, but I'm not sure that's a good idea right now. Well, why? Because how often does that come up? If a medic gives a directive and an EMT is like, well, I can't do that because of this or whatever, and then the medic is like, well, just fucking do it. That doesn't help anybody. Now, maybe they do need to do it regardless, but clearly there's an issue. So let's strive for clarity, solve the problem, and move forward in a way that's beneficial for everybody. And you'll find that your EMTs respond better to that. They start behaving better. They start being more confident, taking more initiative, being more thorough on their skills. They're better at communicating because they feel like they can communicate with you. If they don't feel like they can communicate with you, then shit's going to go sideways on calls or right and left because nobody wants to deal with you. In that situation, you're the problem because you're focusing on volume, not clarity and effective communication. So when you're in those tense situations, and it's easy to do this as a medic because we get caught up in all the details of all the things that need to happen, and our brains just become this like chatterbox of all the different things that have to happen at the same time. It's very easy for us to get caught up in that and get frustrated and maybe insecure sometimes too. There's plenty of situations where you have providers who are insecure, and so their way of coping with that insecurity is projecting louder and trying to project dominance on a scene. That's not how you project a dominance on a scene at all. Period. The end. And I don't mean that in a misogynistic way or what the fuck ever. Get over yourselves. But but when you project, the way you project confidence is calm, because someone who's confident in how they're managing a situation, they're confident in the outcome of a situation, their feathers aren't ruffled. They're not upset. They're not flustered over shit. They know what's going on. Even if internally they're flipping the fuck out, they're going to project that calm demeanor to you because that's what's necessary in the situation. That calm demeanor is what you need in order to operate effectively as a team. And typically, the calmest person in the room is the one who's calling the shots. I've talked about this a long time ago. A good friend of mine who, unfortunately, he's deceased now, but early on in my career, he pulled me aside after a bad call. All of us ended up getting switched around to different trucks as we got patients, and one flew out, and everything was a fucking mess. And, I was a green EMT at the time. And he pulled me aside after the call. It was out in the ambulance bay. He said, dude, it's not your emergency. You were to be the calm in the storm and bring order to chaos. And so I've adopted that as my mantra for how I try to carry myself on calls. Are there days when, well, fuck, everything's going wrong. Everything is falling apart. Everything is not going according to plan. Sure, we all have days where we get frustrated and flustered. It happens. We're fucking human. But over time, patterned behavior makes that the exception, not the norm. So being able to control yourself in such a potent way gives you more credibility, it gives you more confidence, and it typically makes it much easier for you to communicate because you're thinking clearly and you can communicate those thoughts clearly. That's the way it should be. My number one takeaway for all of this is, if there's a miscommunication, stop, take a breath, and first evaluate, is there something I should be doing different? Is there something that I should be saying differently, communicating differently? Or is this a reception problem? Is there something else interfering and the issue wasn't at all with my instructions? You need to take 2 seconds to figure that out. And getting in the habit of doing that shortens that time, and it typically makes you a much more effective communicator the first time around, and you gradually work yourself out of a lot of these problems. So that's all I got for you guys today. Be safe. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.